The war continues in Ukraine. Bombs continue to fall, destroying buildings and taking human lives. Ukrainians continue to flee their country. It is said that there are already more than 12 million who have had to leave and are in refugee status. But in the meantime, some companies of the countries supplying arms to Ukraine, and even some of those countries, are already negotiating with Russia to sell them their products or to buy gas from them. It is as if the dreadful tragedy of the war was gradually ceasing to be news, and the West was getting used to it, was assuming that Russia is going to win because it is stronger and Ukraine is going to lose because it is weaker. But what is the West? I think that's the big question, the fundamental question. What is the West? We could clearly say that the West is not a geographical term, because in that case, for the United States, the Westerners would be the Chinese, for example. The West is a cultural, spiritual concept formed in Europe by the union of three great intellectual and religious spiritual currents: the classical Greek thought, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, the pre-Socratics, the Roman law, the lex, the Roman law, and also the indispensable contribution of the Judeo-Christianity. Thus, a Western country or a Western person is the one who assumes these three concepts, is the one who assumes that truth is important, that the search for truth is essential for the human being. Greek thought is that which assumes that before the law we are all equal, including the weak. Is that which also assumes that the supreme commandment for us to be true human beings is that of love, including forgiveness, whose unsurpassable manifestation was given by our Lord Jesus Christ with his life, with his teachings, and with his redemptive death. Is the West Western? We have to ask ourselves this question, otherwise we may not understand what is happening in Ukraine and what is being discussed there among other places. Is the West Western? Let's see. First of all, the thought. Truth is no longer sought. In many places, people have stopped studying philosophy. Truth is no longer sought. The freedom that is exalted above all, especially after the Enlightenment in the 18th century, freedom has been separated from the truth, while according to one of those sources of the West, Christianity, according to our Lord, it is the truth that will set us free. It's being cut off from thought, and it's being cut off from thought by the introduction of that cynicism which was perfectly reflected in Pilate, that cynicism which is relativism. What is truth? What is truth? In the debate between our Lord and Pilate in the Praetorium, Jesus speaks of truth, and Pilate, a cynic, a Roman, not a Westerner, asks him, what is truth? And orders him to be killed, knowing that he is innocent. Is the West Western when it has ceased to seek the truth? When it has substituted freedom, that freedom of which the enlightened ones boasted so much, when it has substituted freedom for licentiousness? Is the Western when it has ceased to apply the law? Well, they are laws that are passed in parliaments and that are applied, but the law in the full sense of the word, which has to be applied to all, is the Western. When the unborn do not have their rights recognized and are killed in the womb of their mothers, and some of them are caught up to be sold and do business with their small organs through transplants, is the West Western? Does it have these three confluences, in this case that of the law, when not all are equal before the law, not only the unborn but the discarded, those who are no longer productive? Is the West Western when fraternity, that is, that which our Lord Jesus Christ taught us and which in its germ was already contained in the Old Testament, is the West Western when that fraternity has disappeared as true fraternity because the existence of a common father is not recognized? How can there be fraternity if we do not have a common father? How can we be brothers and sisters if we do not have a common father? How can we be brothers if we don't recognize the existence of a God who is above all, who has created us and who loves us? Is the Western when that fraternity, when love has been reduced to sex, and when one is capable of accepting anything so that you can do whatever you want, even kill the innocent, or even change the basic concept of family? Therefore, the question is if the West has ceased to be Western, and if the men who live in that ancient West, wonderful union of the three great currents, the Greek thought, the equality of all before the law brought by the Romans, and then, above all, the Judeo-Christian spirituality, is the West Western? However, it must be said that there is some reason for hope. For example, this week, the Wall Street Journal published a surprising editorial because in it claimed that the Supreme Court of the United States, which is debating whether abortion is a right or not, that is to say, whether abortion has to be approved by all states because it is a right, or whether abortion, on the contrary, is not and has to be left to the individual states to legislate. Well, the Wall Street Journal has said that the Supreme Court has to repeal the famous law that allowed abortion in the United States and leave it up to the states to legislate on this issue. It is not a decisive step forward because obviously what I would have liked, as many would have liked, is for abortion to be banned, but it is a step forward insofar as abortion will no longer be recognized as a human right, and this is truly a fundamental principle to save the West, so that in this formerly Christian West, we are all equal before the law. We shouldn't be surprised that bombs fall. We shouldn't be surprised that those who throw the bombs represent themselves as Christians who are blessed by their patriarchs. We shouldn't be surprised because this is something that is very wrong and that has no justification whatsoever, and that it's scandalous that a sector of the church blesses the dropping of bombs against the innocent. But we shouldn't be surprised that they do this when the West begins to look the other way while Ukraine is being razed to the ground, and when the West has within itself the cancer that is undermining it with relativism, with a gender ideology, with abortion, and also with the persecution suffered by those churches, few, practically the Catholic Church, that continue to say that God has to be in the first place in life and that religious freedom has to be respected. We have to try to save the West because it's our common home, and we have to try to do it with our prayer and with our courage. Actually, it was St. Paul who was the first Western man, and it was Pilate who first killed the West publicly. and the ones who saved it were the martyrs of the Roman Colosseum. Until next week, God willing.